everybody. Welcome back to my workshop and welcome back to my garage. Today's video is video number 5 in my Great Guitar 2023 scratch build entry. And what we're going to be covering in today's video is basically getting the body to the point where I have it right here. As you can see, I've got my pickups routed. I've got my trem cavity or my trem hole routed. I've also got my trem cavity routed on the back. I made the control covers out of the same material as the headstock veneer, which also came from the cutoffs from the flame maple top. As you can see, I've got my control cover for my tremolo set up. It still needs to be thinned down quite a bit. As you can see, it's still standing a bit proud of that. I wanted to shape it while it was thicker to where I didn't take as much chance of cracking or chipping the wood. And then I've also got my control access cavity. So what I plan to do with this, because it's a little bit loose, and I meant to do that, is I'm going to put black ebony veneer around the outside of it, just to offset it a little bit. And that's going to be very similar to what I did for the truss rod access cover. So let's get rolling to the point where I've got the body right here. So now that the neck's to a pretty standard shape here, you can see I've got the fretboard attached. I've got the neck smoothed out. I haven't started the faceting and profiling section part of it yet. I don't have the cap on the headstock, which I'll be putting a cap on there. I've left the heel kind of thick. That way I'll take the heel down to match the body and to match the break angle that I need to put in the neck. So before I can start working on the heel of the neck, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and get the neck pocket routed into the body. As you can see, I've got it traced out. I've kind of got some lines on here on where my carve's going to be. Got my center line established, and I've got the area where my neck cavity is going to be routed out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to route this down. I don't know if you can see it here. Got a line right here. That's 11 millimeters up from the bottom of the body. So I want to leave that 11 millimeters at the back of the body there. That way I have a good base for the neck to sit on. And then what I'll do is I'll bring the heel of the neck down to match that and to match the break angle that I need to put into the neck pocket or onto that heel to allow for the tremolo and everything to line up correctly. So what I'm going to do first is I know my neck pocket's going to be in the right spot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get on my drill press, take some of that material out using a Forstner bit before I go in with the router to trim route that and route it to the proper depth. So let's head on over to the drill press and we'll get that material taken out of there. All right, so what I've got is I've got my Forstner bit in there. I've got the depth stop set to where I won't route all the way to the bottom of where I want to go. That way I can fine tune it with the router. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a couple passes and hog this material out. And there you can see I've got the material hogged out pretty good. I'm well short of my line here. That way I've got room to go in with my router to make those passes to get that bottomed out. That way the pinhole, and the reason why I did that is because the spike on the bottom of the Forstner bit goes in about another 3/16 of an inch. So I didn't want those holes going down into the body with it getting closer. So I want that nice smooth finish on the bottom of my neck pocket. So that's why I did that. These areas here I'll clean up with the chisel a little bit before I go into route. That way there's less routing to do. And now just take a chisel, clean up these edges a little bit. Take a little bit more out of there. You can see I just cleaned that up a little bit. That way it's just going to make it easier to route. Now it's time to go ahead and get the template, the neck routing template glued on. I'll be using masking tape and super glue. I'm not going to use any activator on this. I just want to lay the bead down because I want to have some time to adjust it in case we need to move some stuff, because this is a pretty critical step to make sure that I have my neck pocket in the right spot. So as I lay this down here, I want to make sure I have some time to make the final adjustments to make sure I'm on the center lines all the way down. All right, there, as you can see, I'm on my center lines. Everything looks good. So while I got the template on, you might be wondering why I'm just routing out the neck pocket and not the pickups in the tremolo cavity. I'm using the trim that I've got. I want to get the neck on it, make sure the neck's in the right spot, to make sure I get the scale length all set up properly with the trim, because the focal point on the trim, I want to make sure I drill the holes in the right spot for the base plate. That way I get the scale length correct. So I'm going to wait until I can get the neck temporarily fitted. That way I'll know exactly where my scale length is going to be. And after I know where my scale length is for sure, measured by the nut, by the neck that's going on this guitar, then I can cut out my tremolo cavity and my pickup routes. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and get my router set up with pattern cutting bit. So the bearing will ride along the edge of the template and cut down into here. I've got my router bit installed in my trim router. This first pass is going to take it, smooth out all the edges, and then I'll drop it down a little bit more, and then I'll be able to get further down in and finish off the depth of the pocket. So I'll be making several passes with this. So let's get rolling. All right, we'll get the template pulled off here in a minute, but that looks like the neck pocket is just perfect, right to the line where I wanted it to be. I've got my 11 millimeters of spacing there at the bottom. The neck's going to be a little bit high right now because the heel is still a little thick, but that's going to allow me to make the adjustments that I need to get the proper neck break angle and everything into the guitar. Okay, so I've pulled the template off. You can see the neck pocket there, routed in. I am going to have to do a little bit of work on it. It did come out just a touch loose, which surprised me, but the neck does fit in. It's pretty much the depth I want it to be. So I'm going to have to be careful there. So I don't have as much adjustment room as I wanted, but like I said, I can fix all of that. But this kind of gives you an idea of what it's going to look like. So I'm getting ready to start routing the body now, pickup routes and trim cavity routes. I'm using the Crimson guitar templates for the Paul Reed Smith style guitar. For the trim, I'm using the Vega trim, and this trim is designed to be a drop-in fit for a Fender style trim. When I initially laid this out over the plans, what I saw was the trim cavity hole in the body where it sits in the trim, and where the trim has to sit in order to make the scale line. It has to ride completely forward into that hole. That's where it's supposed to be according to the templates, because what I did is I traced it out on a scrap piece and went ahead and drilled it and went ahead and routed the template just to see kind of where the trim's going to see. And you see it's got that big space behind the trim. I really don't want that. And I also want a little bit of room in front of the trim because that's what the trim pushed all the way forward, and it's just there making the scale line. So what I want to do is I want to have just a touch more adjustability there as far as where the hole is, and I want to change the position of that hole a little bit. I'm going to move it forward on the body approximately 1/16 of an inch. By doing that, what that's going to allow is that's going to allow more room in the front, so when I move the trim, it's not going to immediately hit the body. And it's also going to cover up part of that gap in the back. By moving that forward, that gap isn't going to be as big. So what I did is I traced it all out, and I used a scrap piece of wood just to make sure that everything was where I wanted it to be before I started doing the permanent route on the body, because once I make the route in the body, I'm done. I've got to live with what I've got. So what I've got now is I've got the position traced out on where I want it. Don't know if you can see this here. Let me move out of the frame. But you can see I've moved that forward. You'll see a couple different lines there. I've moved it forward about 1/16 of an inch, maybe almost 1/8 by moving that forward. Keeps my scale line exactly where it's at. I don't lose anything really in the front as far as body mass or anything like that. But by moving that forward like that, I do get a little bit more room in front, and I cover up part of that gap in the back, which is kind of what I was aiming for. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and get this on my drill press, hog out the material, and then set it down on the router table, get it routed out, and we'll roll from there. So here we have most of the material hogged out. That's going to make it easier to route. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and super glue the template down to this using masking tape and super glue, and go ahead and route this cavity out. This is going to go all the way through this hole, and then the back of the cavity gets routed a slightly different way. But I'm going to go ahead and get this set up and get this routed out. So just a public service announcement on this. Anytime you're making changes to your router, whether you're changing a bit or moving the bit up and down in the collet, always make sure you unplug your router while you're doing that work. It'd be horrible to hit the on-off switch while you're doing that with your hands in the way. That could result in a very serious injury. So always disconnect your router whenever you're making any adjustments. And here we go. The initial hole is cut in the top. You notice the line here. I moved it forward right about 1/16 of an inch. It's going to give me a little gap there, but it's also going to decrease that gap back here. My scale line is going to stay exactly the same. So everything's good. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do the figuring out to see what needs to route it out here on the back for the rest of that tremolo cavity. All right, I've got my template glued on. And what I'm going to do first is this pops out. This is for the ledge for the cavity cover if I put one on it. So what I've got is I've got that in now. I'm going to route this area right now to a depth of 20 millimeters. So I've kind of hogged out a little of the material, and now I'm going to just take my router and I'm going to go ahead and just smooth all this up, take it down to 20 mil. That's going to leave me enough room there, and I'll double check it before I do anything. But I've measured a couple guitars. That's going to leave me enough room for my claw, and then give me a little bit of space to put my control cavity cover on there when it comes time. All right, so I've got my control cavity all routed out. But yeah, you can see that came out pretty clean. It's time to start routing out the pickup cavities in the body. So what I've done, as you can see here, I've went ahead and I hogged out the material with the Forstner bit, and then I set my template up. And what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go ahead and route these. I'm gonna take the pickup depth 7/8 of an inch deep. That's gonna be plenty deep enough for the pickups, and it's gonna give me a good distance between the floor of the pickups and the floor of my tremolo routing. All right, it's looking good. We've got our tremolo route cut. We've got our pickup routes routed in. Our nut pocket looks good. The tremolo cover and the tremolo route in the back looks good. I got my control cavity. All right, that's gonna wrap up this video. I hope you like what I'm doing so far. If you do, please click like, click subscribe, leave a comment below. I do answer any comments that I get, positive and negative. But luckily, 99.9% of everything has been positive comments, so that's really good. I really like the way this guitar's taken shape. So, until next time, thank you for tuning in, and take care.